I remember being 8 years old in third grade when Kung Fu Panda 2 came out. A friend of mine, Austin, approached me. "Have you seen it yet?" he said, nearly out of breath. "I saw it yesterday," I exclaimed, eager to vindicate myself as cool enough to have watched the movie. Austin squinted his eyes. "If you saw it, then, what happens right after Po rescues the Furious Five?" I hesitated, thinking to myself, is he thinking about the resolution of the scene, or what literally happens when they are freed? I decided to go with the latter. "They start fighting Lord Shen." "You didn't watch Kung Fu Panda!" His words cut me. "That is in the trailer. Anyone would know that." My thoughts became rapid. What should I say? He doesn't believe me, but I literally saw it yesterday. I tried telling him that the question was ambiguous, obviously though lacking in my articulative capacity as an 8-year-old, leading me to try proving myself by recounting other scenes to no avail. From his ambiguous question, Austin had denied me recognition, and in turn, I him. I accused him of not seeing Kung Fu Panda 2, while openly referencing different scenes to other kids, just loud enough that he could hear. I remember all of these days quite fondly, the time of childhood where everything is transfigured alight. It composes the first learned moments of what will be every day: how to be yourself, with others, how to verify certain claims, when and how to disagree with others effectively, and how to reconcile differences. Another day of recess ended, and we both bolted to the water fountain. As things are in third grade, Austin identified himself as the fast one. When I got to the water fountain first, I recall something he kept telling me. I wasn't trying, by the way. It is telling about what our society values that the go-to exercise to say, "I wasn't trying anyway." It's something I've especially seen throughout school, in a bit of a different form. The fear of being found stupid. We may have similar reactions to being questioned, especially about those beliefs or thoughts we hold near and dear, consider to be essential to our identity. And who among us can have our essential identity and way of life questioned, without feeling at least slightly provoked? I think the only correct and honest response to being called stupid is, "You know what, maybe you're right, I am stupid, and that's okay." Similarly, "You know what, maybe I'm not as fast as I thought, and should practice running more." After all, what is wrong with being stupid, being slow? Although all these anecdotes took place in my childhood, on a nearly day-to-day basis do I still perceive these kinds of interactions, most of all in myself. I take it that these moments in life where the self-image and another's image of oneself are in conflict, where our defensive guard is flared up, I take it that these originate from a fear of vulnerability, a fear of either being, or being considered, stupid or slow. This fear of vulnerability is itself a conditioned attitude from a distorted emotional relationship with risk or error, best understood as trauma, or making mistakes is bad instead of an opportunity for learning, itself perhaps a result of heavy negative reinforcement. Analogously, it is this feedback loop of trauma and fear that Kierkegaard calls despair, the inhibition to become a fully realized human self, something he feared to be increasingly common with the rapid decay of cultural and religious values, downstream of the Enlightenment and Industrial Revolution. For him, the most dangerous kind of despair was one in which it lingered undetected, someone in despair without even knowing it, and thereby relegated as an invisible victim to this cycle. And I include here a quote by Kierkegaard. "No, despair, or trauma, is verily not something which appears in the young, something out of which one grows as a matter of course. It overlooks the fact that the majority of men do never really manage in their whole lives to be more what they were in childhood and youth, namely, immediacy, with the addition of a little dose of self-reflection." And I have another quote here, by William Blake, the poet. "The fool who persists in his folly shall become a wise man." The fear of being vulnerable may coalesce into the attitude known as dogmatism. Have you ever asked someone a question to be responded to with a "'cause"? Dogmatism is this natural brushing off, a kind of dismissiveness toward scrutiny. This is why Hegel describes dogmatism as Nothing else but the opinion that the true is immediately known. What Hegel is trying to say is that justifications like "'cause," or among parents, "because I said so," or any similar answer constitute the weakest justifications, precisely because they are the most immediate. "Because I said so" is immediate as it is equally applicable to any possible claim. Justifications get their value from being mediated or determinate, that is, justifying particular things over other particular things. Therefore, an argument that both proves and disproves God, Santa, and SpongeBob is meaningless because it is indeterminate. Dogmatism is this same attitude that asks why it should believe in God with a time limit of 3 minutes, something that I've been challenged to do. Or similarly, considers only what is immediately visible in sense perception to be real, both because it takes what is true to be demonstrated as true immediately, and more ironically, it takes whatever its default beliefs are as already true. How then am I to make sense of Austin telling me I didn't watch Kung Fu Panda 2? Recollecting what happened, I stated that I did watch the movie, a claim I was held accountable for by his criterion, which I failed to meet, with the consequence of any further opportunity to communicate shut down by his "you did not watch it." In the experience of encountering something that appears to be alien to oneself, false or wrong, Hegel distinguishes two possible attitudes. The first attitude is one which asks, why bother with the false? It views whatever content that is alien to itself with a purely negative gaze. At its most vulgar, it refutes things by calling them stupid or slow, and at its best, it merely knows how to refute and destroy whatever is opposed to it. Hegel fleshes this out. That something is not the case is merely a negative insight, a dead end which does not lead to a new content beyond itself. It is the vanity of its own knowing, a scrutiny that gloats at its capacity to raise every argument it comes across. Hegel terms this either raisonnement, the French Enlightenment term for argumentation, or, more lucidly, abstract negation. That the vast history of philosophy until him, as well as a fair amount of ordinary communication, both tragically takes the shape of abstract negation, is a bold interpretive claim that Hegel commits himself to healing. It is certainly easy to see how my interaction with Austin was so unsatisfying as it was doomed by this very attitude. Even for circles, take political ones, with more significant arguments to make. Have you ever witnessed an argument that ended in one side going, "You know what? You're right. That's a good point." It is in noticing this that Hegel writes, "It is not difficult to see that the way of asserting a proposition, adducing reasons for it, and in the same way refuting its opposite by reasons, is not the form in which truth may appear." His reasoning follows thusly. Its truth does not lie in this partly narrative exposition, and is therefore just as little refuted by asserting the contrary, by calling to mind and recounting conventional truths, as if they were established in familiar truths, or by dishing up something new with the assurance that it comes from the shrine of inner divine intuition. By the assurance coming from some inner divine intuition, Hegel is commenting on the destitute method of responding, for example, to the child who is critical of their family's faith, merely saying to them, "Just have more faith, honey." He terms these kinds of responses as bare assurances and says about them, "One bare assurance is just as much worth as another." What precisely was it then in my interaction with Austin where the breakdown in communication occurred? I take it that disregarding the emotional insecurity or trauma underlying his particular reactions, the mutual dissatisfaction of the interaction consisted in being held to a standard that was not my own. The fundamental flaw of abstract negation consists in its one-sidedness, hearkening back to the partly narrative exposition. It consists in its inability to refute another on their own terms. In essence, it is a failure to undertake another's point of view as just as significant to one's own, a failure I shall be the first to admit as being guilty of. This way of responding Hegel describes as usually the first reaction on the part of oneself's knowing to something unfamiliar. It resists it in order to save its own freedom from vulnerability, and its own insight, its own authority, for this is the guise in which what is newly encountered first appears, and to get rid of the appearance that something has been learned and the sort of shame that this is supposed to involve. It is here the second attitude is revealed. If abstract negation sees not me in everything it disagrees with, all disagreement is merely false, then the second attitude, determinate negation, sees not me in everything. It sees the mediated form of saying itself in everything it comes across, whether or not it agrees or disagrees. If the failure of abstract negation is in failing to see anything positive or reasonable in another, then the success of determinate negation is in fully recognizing the validity, the positivity in everything, and taking it completely seriously. In my opinion, it is treating every question as though it is honestly one's own. And this methodology, in philosophy at least, is known as the immanent critique. For Hegel, the truth is the whole, that is, the truth is a totality, present in everything, albeit present in different moments for each thing. The old man can see himself in the baby as his past, and the baby can see the old man as his future. So is it the same with the evolution and history of thinking, of philosophy. The religious person may see their own inquiries in the skeptic, and the skeptic likewise may see their own prior, uncritical nature, or future faith in the religious person. What is characteristic of love is that they may all see themselves in one another. To love one another, they must treat each other as they would have treated their past selves, earnestly trying to sort out claims together. Anyone who says anything has a reason for saying it. This is a reason that must be loved, understood, all the more intimately. This is what it means to walk the extra mile. Though there is this implicit reason behind anyone uttering anything, it is only determinate negation, or love, that fully treats and understands this as explicit. I believe the capacity to see oneself in everything is a key insight that emerges throughout the history of religion, the pinnacle of which I take to be Christianity, for reasons explored elsewhere in these videos and blogs, posts, articles. Not saying another's argument as one's own not only makes disagreements dissatisfying to both parties involved, more fatally, denying others the ability to ever successfully held you accountable precludes you from all growth. It is the eminent question: if I was wrong, or not going about something in the best way, how would I find out? This topic of communication is dear to me, as I believe it to be the greatest, if not one of the greatest obstacles to loving one another as we love ourselves. To unconsciously refuse to see something from another's point of view out of fear of being wrong. I have noticed that this fear presents a kind of despair, an inhibition to become oneself, especially so the older one gets, as the easier it becomes to convince oneself that one is done with learning. And if you have ever tried to convince someone above the age of 60 about something, you understand what I mean. If for nothing else, I have sought to delineate this obstacle of dogmatism, unconscious or not, as to better be able to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. I juxtapose this dogmatism and fear with the symbol of communion, and I have a painting here in this article of communion. Those intimate relations to others we depend upon for our identity. Communion is the act of putting one's defensive guard down, and with vulnerability, eating, walking, and even worshiping together. In essence, communion is reciprocal love. It is not refuting an alien point of view through opposing reasons, but rather, it is seeing and taking up the alien position as one's own, even if a past self, and merely developing it to its logical or existential conclusion, which may be different. For the reason that our very identity depends upon the vital accountability of others, dismissing or mistreating another's earnest questions or inquiry is really denying who you really are, specifically in a way that haunts. Misanthropy, if anything, is a denial of oneself. Ironically, I especially see this mistreatment in comparative religion, and reasonably so, religious statuses being one of the most essential and therefore sensitive elements to our identities, where many religious, specifically in my own experience, Christians are seldom willing to entertain the honest scrutiny of others toward their religion, something I take to be a lack of faith, and again, a fear of vulnerability, a fear of being wrong or stupid. St. Augustine comments on this phenomena. How can we speak unlovingly about the Trinity? The very essence of faith consists in maintaining itself in the face of scrutiny or desolation. This itself is rooted in the idea that anything genuinely true will, when prompted, vindicate itself as determinately true. It goes hand in hand with the kind of hope that William Blake describes of why we would ever attempt to articulate what we believe to be true to anyone. When he says, "Truth can never be so told as to be understood and not believed." Hegel's enduring achievement was in undertaking the immense labor of seriously and charitably engaging with the history of philosophy, the history of whys, which he arranged in the format of a phenomenology, the gradual emergence of what was implicitly guiding and governing us all along, the truth, increasingly revealed and made more explicit. With Austin, not only was being held to a one-sided criterion of failure in communication, but more significantly, the implosion of the interaction began with his accusation of, "You did not watch Kung Fu Panda." It is to entirely cut off any way of relating to one another to say this, and in more extreme examples, this takes the shape of, "I am never talking to you again," or "I will never forgive you." Anyone who has an estranged family member will know the pain in these words. I take it that one of the pragmatic goals of Christianity is to avoid this social rupture with, for instance, the prayer, "Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us." This kind of prayer makes it far easier to maintain the maturity and healing power of humility in the face of any perceived wrongdoing. But what happens when we are the wrongdoing? A prominent example may be seen in intrusive thoughts, "You're stupid, you're slow," which take the shape of abstract negation. The best attitude towards them is what I find to be determinate negation or love, of charitably accepting the thoughts as coming from some place of reality which is okay. Perhaps such intrusive thoughts come from an afraid part of oneself that will only grow more afraid if you get upset at them for having the thoughts. Helpful intrusive thoughts that have been loved, validated, and understood then reconcile the reason for why one is stupid with, pragmatically, what striving one may abide with in order to improve oneself, or else recognition that one isn't what one fears one is, being stupid, etc. The distorted relationship to mistakes, fear of error, the fear of making mistakes, turns out to actually be fear of the truth, the fear of growth. I may be stupid and slow, and that is okay, as I am trying. How else would I grow from such potential realities? Making a mistake, unwittingly being a certain way, even a negative way, is the essential moment in learning and developing. Internalizing this negation, this experiencing of error, is accepting life. This is one reason for why the crucifixion is so central in Christianity. It is the only means for resurrection. Hegel describes this vividly. But the life of spirit is not the life that shrinks from death and keeps itself untouched by devastation, but rather the life that endures it and maintains itself in it. It wins its truth only when, in utter dismemberment, it finds itself. Communion is the precondition for the most significant task of life, becoming yourself. Our implicit individual identity may only be fully realized or made explicit through our relationships with others, and it is only communion that washes away the gradual and seasonal buildup of muck that clogs the pipes of love. Communion is the attitude towards yourself that allows you to love others, and an attitude towards others that allows you to love yourself. That battle with Austin so long ago slowly served as the spark to my own budding fascination with how to relate to others, which is a question I would like to leave with you, dear viewer. How do you relate to others? What does your communion look like? To this day, one attitude stands firm in my mind. For whereas I was free to all, I made myself the servant of all, that I might gain the more. And I became to the Jews a Jew, so that I might gain the Jews. To the weak I became weak, that I may gain the weak. I have become all things to all men, that I may save all. And I end here with a beautiful painting of... It's on one of the last chapters in either of the Gospels, where Christ is unknown by two disciples who are walking. I think it's called the Road of Emmaus, Emmaus, however you would pronounce that. And they speak to Christ without knowing that he is Christ. And it's just a beautiful sort of message of you have no idea who you're speaking to whenever you speak to anybody. Giving all the more credence to the sort of message of he who does unto the least of men does unto me, as Christ says. Thank you so much for watching, and yes, I hope you enjoyed this little article, this stirring of my heart. I wrote this shortly after the last video, and if you like this one, you'd probably like the last one. So, thank you so much.